All right, the changing role of the parent in the college admissions process, as I just described, um, this is one of those sort of big life transitions. And um, I don't know about you, but I think I will take all the help I can get around these sorts of things. And it's good to know that there are people who are actually experts in this area who can give you best practices and tips and just hold space for you because it's hard. So I kind of introduced who I am and who Holly is, but here are our official bios. You can see our education, all of these things. I tend to think that doesn't really matter, but a lot of people like to see that stuff. Um, we've both been in education for almost 20 years, Holly and I, and we work very closely together. And our students have seen a lot of different kinds of success. So I can rattle off all the schools that our students and Holly's students have gotten into. But I think what's more impressive to me and more meaningful to me, and I'm sure to Holly, is that they come out of this process. I'll give you a little bit of our vision here. They come out of this process whole people. The stress of this process doesn't eat them up. They aren't terrified of what comes next, and they're not losing sleep over, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? They are grounded in a firm self-identity. They are confident in their ability to meet challenges, whatever those challenges may be. They know how to ask for help. And the thing that's really amazing is that they're motivated by their own desires and goals. It's not just mom said I have to do this, or I want to impress this teacher, and so I got to do this thing. This is what they want for their own life. And what a way to step into adulthood. And it's really inspiring to watch these kids go through the process. They come in not knowing really anything about themselves or what they want out of their lives, and they leave with a really clear vision of what they want to do, at least for the next short amount of time before that changes again. And it is always going to change. But one of the things I like to say is, it's not just teach Amanda fish. It's teach them how to learn how to fish, so that whatever the challenge may be, whatever the situation may be, whatever the pivot they need to make is, they are going to know how to do that. Not because it's the same template as the last time they did it, but because they've got the skills. And I'll stop rambling about that and let Holly talk. But this only happens when they can truly start to develop their own sense of independence and own the process for themselves. So, Holly, I'm going to let you start talking now. Stop rambling.
Yeah. So jumping off of that really like the key to this transformation that we've seen is when a student, they have this feeling of independence and confidence and ownership over the process. Well, some of the things that can get in the way of that have to do with the way the parent's interacting with the student. So if our goal as parents, helping our children gain these skills and this empowerment, if that's our goal, then some things that can get in the way have to do with the things we're bringing to the table as well. Um, so I'd say like the first step as you were thinking about the role of the parent in this process is not necessarily looking outward, understanding everything about the process, getting all the advice, but it's turning inside and taking a little time to reflect on all the things that you're bringing to this process and perhaps the baggage that comes along with it. So I've noted a couple mismatches that may occur if there's a discrepancy between something that you may feel about the process, or that the parent that you want to be in this situation, and some of the ways that it may come across. And I bring that up to encourage a little reflection about all the ways that honestly that parenting through this process can be really complicated. So the first example I had is if perhaps you say like, I'll be proud of you wherever you end up, which is a wonderful sentiment and really supportive. But if your behavior indicates that you actually do prefer elite schools, or that your head is turned by rankings, you're always talking about where other people got into college, and it's clear you feel very proud or jealous of that, then a student may feel that, yeah, like I see that you're most impressed by elite schools. I'm still getting the message that my task here is to perform and get into these top schools, which can, create pressure and not have that sort of through line that you might want between your values and how that's impacting your team. Another example is if, the praise is in an effort to really encourage a student to get past a fear of rejection. You might say, like, oh, I can imagine why any college wouldn't accept you. You're fantastic. That kind of messaging could put more pressure on the teen to feel like, yeah, it's up to me to get into all of these schools, and paint an unrealistic picture of just how embedded rejection is in the college landscape. It is definitely, it's a part of the process and definitely an opportunity for growth. But if we sort of uncritically send a message that, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be great, we may actually create a little conflict along the way. The last one I have is let me take some of these things off your plate. I think the urge to help is, it's so wonderful, it's caring, it comes naturally to parents. But there is a downside to it in that if it feels imposed, if it feels like, kind of something that's not necessarily wanted or an intrusion, then a student may feel like you don't really believe that they can handle all these things. It may start to eat away at their self-confidence and their self-efficacy. So I added a quote at the bottom from Anne Lamott, and I love this: "Help is the sunny side of control." And I just think it's a great quote for just pointing out that, something that we may be uncritical about and just thinking that, like, this is our role. This is something that is natural and a parent should always do, is helping their kid, could actually have another facet to it, especially in this process where they're learning to embrace their own autonomy and self-efficacy. Help may be more about control. So I invite you to kind of think about and unpack some of the things that maybe you're bringing to this process that might be getting in the way of supporting this growth and autonomy that you would really want for your student. So there's that sort of first step in unpacking. For the next part of it, we're going to talk a little, like, zoom out and then look outward and see about the college journey and some practical things that you can do after this self-reflection has happened.
So I recognize that when it comes to the college admissions process, it seems like there's just so much kind of swirling misinformation and urgency. And oh my God, we should have started doing this thing 2 years ago. It can be really hard to focus on what it is that you're bringing to the table and what kind of atmosphere you're helping to create in the home around these sorts of conversations. So the first thing I always like to do is sort of give you some facts and say, here's what it actually is. Not all of this has to be done at once. You'll see we've got a pyramid here that's layered. Some things are sort of more foundational and some things you do at the very end of the process. And in fact, if I had my way, this pyramid would probably have like 7 or 8 layers. There's a lot that goes on before this, or you could take anything in the preparing to apply stage and make it its own little pyramid layer. So there are a lot of things to do, but I want to kind of give you this overview and give you a sense of not all of it has to be done at once. And while you may be able to wrap your brain around all of the things that are going to go into this, your student probably won't. You're going to have to piecemeal this information out to them. Maybe it'll come through the school. They're definitely going to hear about this from their peers. But your student doesn't have the kind of mental capacity. I mean, in rare cases they do. Your student typically doesn't have the mental capacity to think about, oh my God, there's all this stuff I have to do. And then think about, oh, I can worry about that in 3 months. I can worry about that next year. It all kind of front loads and they get really overwhelmed. And this is where you as a parent can step in and hold that stress for them and say, all right, I've done my research. I know what we need to do, and I will prompt you. Right. But it's going to take some agreements. And so one of the other reasons I wanted to give you this overview is so that we can talk about one of the most foundational things you can do with your student as they embark on this journey, which really starts at the beginning of high school, is to have some agreements with your child. And Holly and I are going to walk you through a tool just to do that. So let me walk you through all of these different steps. In preparing to apply, that I think for me really covers everything from the first day of freshman year until kind of the middle, maybe winter of junior year of 11th grade. Candidacy development is quite broad. And it includes doing well in your classes and choosing the classes that you're going to take throughout high school. It includes your extracurricular profile, what you do over the summers, whether you're going to get a part-time job, the kind of leadership you end up developing, the relationships you build with teachers. All of that falls under candidacy development. It's not like a set of tasks that you have to check off, but this is really where the student becomes who they're going to be in the application, not who they're going to be for the rest of their life, but who they're going to be in their application. That's where you're also going to want to make a plan for standardized testing. It's not required everywhere, but some students are still going to want to test. You're going to need to build a good college list. And for me, a good college list is one that fits the strengths of your student, not one that matches the rankings or has all of these IVs on it, or, you know, any kind of other measure. It's really about matching the colleges to your students' strengths and their goals. You're going to need to do some financial preparation. That's a really big one as college gets more and more expensive. And you're going to want to plan out what you're going to do about letters of recommendation. Again, not every college requires them, but majority of colleges do. And so you're going to want to build some teacher relationships so that you can ask for them by the end of junior year. Tanya, I have another session on building a college list that I can send you, because today we're talking about what you need to do, not what your student needs to do. So that's preparing to apply. Crafting applications is actually filling out the forms, writing the essays, making sure you got all the deadlines straight. There are a lot of moving parts to the college application process. And this is where you really start to kind of check off the boxes and get all of that stuff done. And then finally, we have submitting and right after. So this would be making sure all the documents have been sent, you know, your transcripts, your test scores, final proofreading, actually submitting the applications. And then if the college requests or requires one, your student may be doing some interviews, right? Everybody wants to know about the college list. I did a college list session last month, actually, I think in March. So I'll make sure you get the recording. So this is sort of our overview. Again, there's a lot that can go into each piece of this. Each one of these is almost its own process. But here's what I want you to think about doing with it. Janetta, crafting application starts in junior year. Definitely. I like students to be thinking about what are they going to be writing about and making a writing plan for their essays over the summer between junior year and senior year. So you got to start that a little bit ahead of time in junior year. But let me get you to the tool that I think is going to be helpful here. Because again, we want to think about what's your role. These are all the things your kid needs to do. And as Holly said, they need to own this. So what we've done is we've created a series of, I'm calling them cards. They're really these sort of slides here. There is a slide for every element that I just listed out on the previous little pyramid slide. Okay. And it breaks down what are the tasks involved in completing this step of the process. And we've coded it so that you know what is it that the student needs to be doing. It's in bold. What's optional, right? But obviously, if you can visit, we like you to visit, but not everybody can. So it's optional. Anything with an asterisk, your student, though they're owning this part of the process, they should be seeking feedback. And then if there's a little O next to it, that's something that they could delegate. Maybe mom is better at planning and planning the college visits and the logistics and the travel details, all of that, better than, your student is. And that's fine, right? And one of the things that I think is important to remember here is that it's not just you and your student. You have other people on your support team, maybe an older sibling or other family members. I had a cousin help me a lot with my college applications, an older cousin who had just been through the process. There are people in your child's school who can help with all of this. You may have other kinds of communities that you're a part of, cultural communities, religious communities. There may be people there who can help you as well. There are also professionals that you can bring in to help you manage parts of this or help your student manage parts of this. But the key is that your student, by going through these different slides, and understanding what the tasks are, and understanding what they really need to own, what they could give away, learns to develop some of this independence and will actually take ownership of delegating some of these things, right? They can't just assume, oh, mom's going to plan my college visits. They've got to take the onus to say, okay, I've got to ask mom to plan the college visits, and I got to tell her where I want to visit, or we got to talk about where we're going to go, right? Holly, talk to us a little bit about how these conversations can help.
Yeah, so we imagine this as sort of a catalyst for ultimately a conversation where the student looks through these, has a sense of the scope and the content of what the college application will entail, but can see it in bite-sized pieces. But as they see this, they're the project manager. It's up to them to decide who their team is, who they want to ask for letters of recommendation, who they want to be proofreading their essays, who does what. And they have a sense of, okay, like, what tasks should I be seeking help for? And we really nudge them to do that because learning to seek feedback is one of the great adult skills that we're not all that great at sometimes. So it's something that it's part of the growth of the process. We also recommend setting check-ins. So we don't necessarily say, give them the slides and run. That's a recipe for anxiety and maybe disaster. But the idea is that you can have a conversation and agreement where they have the information they need to be an equal. And even more, and to really take charge and say, this is how I see this going. And then you can check in every week if you have an agreement, or every 2 weeks, or whatever cadence works for you, and see how is progress going. Do you need additional help from someone, on the list? Do you need to adjust some of these things? If progress is going well, it's an opportunity to celebrate it. And if it's not, it's an opportunity to readjust. So that way you can build in structured communication about progress without nagging or surprising them when they come home from school with a question. It really sort of sets some ground rules that all the parties can expect and follow.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, this should be familiar to a lot of you, as most of you probably have teams that you manage. This is something that you do. I know something I do with all of my teams. We have a weekly meeting. We have a meeting agenda where we can put all of our questions, and I don't have to be worrying about it at all times of the day because I know I'm talking to so-and-so on Tuesday at 3:00, and we're going to go through all of the deliverables that I expected for this week, the things that they asked me to do, and the things that I asked them to do, and we can be nimble and pivot if we need to. So this is a really great communication tool, really is what it is. And this is just one slide of, I think, 14 that we're giving you that will get you at the end of the presentation. So Holly, I'm going to give the mic back to you. Talk to us about what you see with parents.
All right. I got some downer slides, but it'll look up in a minute. So let's say you've had this wonderful conversation, you've maybe set up some roles, you have a sense of what the plan is going forward that's been co-created with your team. There's still going to be a lot of challenges that likely will come up, and it's good to just sort of expect those and notice them when they come up, and know that this is just something to expect, that you'll have to deal with and manage. So the first is stress. It's unavoidable in this process. The stakes are high. The process is unpredictable at many points, and there's just going to be some stress. But being proactive and knowing, what's something that can make you be a source of calm for you in this process. What's a thought that grounds you, that gives you confidence. That's going to help you sort of deal with this and be a source of calm for your team as well. You may find yourself battling a little distrust. It's hard to hand over something so important and valuable to a teenager. So you may worry if they can really do it. The secret to trust in many cases is that you kind of have to trust someone for them to prove that they are worthy of the trust. There's a little bit of the cycle there. So this is something to keep an eye out if you notice that that's happening, as you know, as you're navigating this relationship with your teen. It's definitely something that can be worked on. You may also encounter limiting beliefs about the college admissions process. They're everywhere. We're surrounded by them. One example I often hear is parents may feel that their teen should be scheduled, to the gills with activities in order to be competitive for college, and that's something that can actually limit their own self-expression and discovery of what they really love. So it's something that can actually kind of get in the way, that type of misperception. So things you can do is, yeah, have a trusted mentor that is calming and knows about the process. Reach out to a professional, or Sheila is always grounding, and can help sort of you assess whether the beliefs that you're structuring your behavior on are actually accurate and helpful. You may also tackle a few control issues. As you hand over sort of ownership of this process to your teen, I like to point out that relinquishing control over something it's a decision, but it's also a process and a practice. It's something that you have to do over and over again. So it's good to check in and see, are you really letting them take charge of this? And if you are, there's going to be a lot of discomfort with that. I don't think it's necessarily easy, and that varies, depending on families. But it's good. Like, those check-ins can also be an opportunity for you to talk to your student and say, am I doing okay? My role to support you without taking over. Like, is this, am I fulfilling that part too, or do we need to readjust? Similarly, you may also worry about role confusion or experience that. Even if you do explicitly set roles, it's very easy for those to become blurred over time. So setting up the expectation that you'll consistently discuss it if someone, steps over a line, or if you see any sort of deviation there, it's an opportunity to, course correct, to modify the roles if need be, but not necessarily to let the lines become completely blurred. And finally, you may encounter some communication barriers. They may already be there, but this is something that I think it has an amplifying effect on a lot of the other challenges. That if there isn't clear communication and conversations about what the expectations are and whose roles who's taking what role, then many of these other issues can grow. So as you're battling communication barriers, we'll talk about a couple strategies for those later. I think the next slide. So, yay! It gets much happier now. At Watershed Parent Coaching, the first session is often spent unpacking a lot of those things, right? Like the issues that are coming up for a parent as they're supporting the autonomy of their teen. It's something that can be very difficult. It can feel like a loss sometimes. And that we get that all on the table in the first session, but then we shift pretty quickly to focusing on what's working. And I guarantee you things are working. You're doing so much right, much more right than it feels like is going wrong. And the basic principle of coaching is that we're really drawn to those areas of strength and growth. And the more we focus on those, the more they expand and boost up the other areas of weakness. And challenges often can address themselves, right? Like, so, if we feel like there's good communication, like you can always talk to each other. Then you have something where you can, grow the other areas, where you can address some of those problems of distrust through sort of, a careful conversation. So what we try to do then is identify those areas of growth and see how they can sort of spread and influence the other ones. I like to think about 7 spheres of growth in my coaching. I think that these are the main areas I like to touch upon that are really relevant for parents as they're working on supporting their teen's autonomy. The first is clarity. It's hard to do this if you don't feel like you have a sense of what the admissions process is all about, right? If you feel like, okay, this is the blind leading the blind here, it's really hard to gain a sense of confidence that you'll need. Um, so if that's an area of strength, and we use that in some of the other areas, and if it's an area for growth, there's lots of opportunities to improve that. Um, Calmness, uh, some parents may feel like this is a strength, that they're like, you know what, I can help my teen find a source of calm. I can be there for them as a steady presence. And other people may need to find a way to work on that a little more. Compassion is one of my faves. it This is really like, it's a huge transition for the student and the parent. It's a difficult process that's changing year by year. It's difficult. And I think finding that kindness and gentleness toward your teen and to yourself, and really leaning into it, can do so much as well. And so I like to observe it, reflect it back, and support that in any way I can. Same with cooperation. So a coaching relationship is about cooperation, deciding where the conversation is going to go, what are the ideas that are being formed. They're all co-constructed. But I also encourage parents to have that relationship with their teen, and to develop that, so that they're supporting the growing autonomy of their teen by really seeing them as someone who is crafting their own destiny. And even though the parent absolutely has an important role in this process, uh, they can see that, growing autonomy of the teen, and work with it in a way that's really constructive and not necessarily a battle. Uh, so by confidence, I mean, having confidence in your teen and trust in them that they can do this. That means a lot, and that can really grow through the process, but also that you're confident in your role that you've chosen as a parent. Um, it can be really difficult to do less, to take a step back and feel like a good parent. Right? Like, as I said before, like, help is the sunny side of control. It's like, well, it's so hard not to help if your teen needs it. They're your kid. So I think building a parent's confidence to say, I'm putting this in their hands, and it may not be as good as if I oversaw it completely. I don't know, but this is the choice I've made to support their growth, and that's ultimately my goal. Um, so whatever goal you craft as a parent, whatever your mission will be, my goal is to help you have confidence in that, so that you can continue to reflect back on your values and that core of what you're doing. Even when other parents, you may hear the noise of other parents doing so much. With communication, I love to see if communication lines are open, honest, and energizing. That's the dream, right? That your teen will come and talk to you about these things because it makes them feel better. And that takes some practice. It takes work on that, but it's definitely possible. And again, if that is a strength, then you can use that to grow all these other areas. And finally, consistency. That, working on these things and raising up these elements helps you sort of be a stable sort of place where your team can come, even when this process is pretty volatile in the various stages, and they may feel ups and downs, and they're applying for their dream school and waiting, and then you get results. But if you know where you stand, and your approach to parenting throughout this process, you can provide a lot of that consistency.
I love these so much, Holly. I mean, I think it's like the dream. We all want to be this kind of parent. But it strikes me that these are exactly the things that, parents, we need to practice as our children go through this process, because when they go off to college, you can still be all of these things. You will have had enough practice to be this consistently when they're in college. And that's when your relationship with your kid is going to change quite a bit. Right. And so this is sort of getting you ready for that transition to be in the role you want to be in when they're off and out on their own, which can be so terrifying. I know. But I also want to point out this does feel very aspirational. I mean, as much as I know about this process and how much all of this is like such a beautiful vision for me, it feels so far away sometimes. And it also feels like, oh my God, how can I stop to like have a source of calmness for myself when my kid has 5 million things on fire that we need to take care of immediately? They don't even seem concerned. So I have to like drag them into this. How do we get from like that frame of mind into a place where I can say, wait, if I invest in growing in these areas, in these in my relationship with my teenager, it will help them manage what they need to manage and grow into the role that they need to take on. How do we make that transition?
Absolutely. So part of it is knowing, that kind of role specification that we talked about should help a little bit with that. Is that if your actual hands-on role in the application process is not as time intensive, is not constantly overseeing and seeing those things, then you can focus on these other aspects of growth. It allows you to say, okay, my goal is not to finish their application or make sure they finish their application or make sure they get into this school. My goal is to support them in feeling confident that they can do it, give them, the necessary help that they ask for, and to encourage them to talk with me often about it. So you'd ultimately be not putting out some of those fires, understanding that's like that feeling of so many things to do, and all of these other things are not all your responsibility to deal with. If it feels like there's so many of them and a student does need that kind of intensive support, there are options. There are mentors, there are admissions consultants at Signet Education. I am one of them as well.
Yes.
That can be a huge relief, and actually teach them the value of mentorship over the years. Like, having a trusted mentor, and one that's not necessarily family, right? Like, this a trusted adult would be one of the most valuable experiences a student can have, and prepare them to seek out those mentors in college and beyond. So in some ways, pulling back a little from the tasks, and the work of it and getting out of the weeds can really help you decide where you're going to put your attention and energy. And that may feel like a strange move, right? Like, like we need to get this letter of recommendation request brag sheet done now. It's hard to just kind of sit back and be like, maybe it'll be late. Maybe we'll learn a lesson. But what's important for me right now is to let them learn a lesson and support them as they cope with it. That would be a way of growing, kind of building trust, in a roundabout way, but supporting your students' confidence and showing them that it's like, yeah, I do believe that you can do this, even if there are a few mess ups.
I feel better already. Thank you. I think one thing that really stuck with me is like parents are allowed to help, but the key is to get your kid to ask for it. You can't just swoop in and take this out of their hands, right? You really want to have that conversation, and the worksheet we'll give you afterwards has a whole set of instructions, but you really want to have some ground rules up front to say, if you need my help, tap me in. I'll help you. I'm here for you. But let's get clear on the ways you want me to help and where. And you may have to have that conversation over and over again, which is the fun part of being a parent.
Oh, all right. Since I think we all acknowledge that none of this is easy, and it's quite a daunting process. I wanted to talk a little bit about parent coaching and the work I do there. Um, so we looked at those 7 spheres of growth, and I want to emphasize that everyone and every family is different, and everyone starts with different strengths and different areas that they need to work on. But what the coach is there for is to assure you that even though the admissions process is new, you are still the expert on your family, and your relationships. You do know what works best. So what a coach does is really help you unlock your own wisdom about this process, by helping clear the weeds a little. So I really help when I work with parents. I help them reflect more deeply when we talked about those, contradicting messages, it's hard sometimes to surface those yourself. You can journal, you can talk to people, but it is quite difficult to do that. And so coaching can really help you, with a laser focus, uncover some of those things. That can help you stay motivated by, providing accountability and keeping things positive. Part of the job of a coach is to reflect back what is working well, so that you can see that and really own your strengths in your parenting. And finally, I feel like it's really, well, not finally, semi-finally, penultimately, a coach can help with accountability. So, and this is something that I always benefit from, right? I can have lofty goals, I can dream all day, but the to-do list, following up on it, making sure those things get done, is always, it's helpful to have another person with that. And finally, a coach can help you celebrate your progress. So one of the challenging things about rethinking a parent's role in this process is that the admissions process has an end outcome that seems obvious, right? You've been accepted, dream college, yay! Like it's the result you talk about, you share with other people, it's what everybody asks about. Well, I think it's really difficult for a parent to disentangle that end result from their own goal, because that may be the student's goal. That's their life that they're working towards. But you can craft a parent-centered goal through this process that's more about your role. You're not getting into college. Your role may be, I want to, support my student in putting together the best application that they can, doing something that they're proud of, discovering their best, fit schools. But it will be one that's a little less flashy and a little harder to measure. So a coach can really help you judge your progress by that new yardstick and say, no, you're doing an amazing job in what you're setting out to do, which is supporting your kids' growth, helping them become the kind of adult that's going to succeed for the rest of their life and not just in this one task.
I think that's so great, Holly. I have a very close friend who just had a baby, and she's talking to me about reading all the parenting books and talking to everybody about their parenting methods. But it strikes me that this moment that a student is graduating from high school and going off to college, or even if they're not going to college, they may be leaving the house, is obviously not the end of your relationship with the child, but it is a major milestone and kind of signifies you're done raising them. Right. I mean, obviously parents, they will always be our babies, and we will always have, advice for them and hopes and dreams for them. But, the relationship changes quite a bit. And Julie, don't cry too much. I was talking to somebody leading up to this session, and she was like, I don't know how to be an empty nester. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think there's so much value in seeing this as a transition that is akin to bringing this child into the world. Everything is about to change, including the way you see yourself. And so it's a really great time for that kind of introspection to do with somebody else, right? That as many parenting books as there are, and you can get a doula and you can get all of these things, right, to help you with the transition of bringing a child into the world. We don't have nearly as much for parents as they are transitioning out of the house. So this is one of those really kind of amazing things that exists out there, that yes, people do get parent coaches for the college admission process and the empty nest transition. They do. They really do. Yes, Laura, we need to get our lives back, right? I mean, that's my biggest fear is like, well, what am I going to do with all this free time? I don't even know who I am anymore. But parent coaching can help with that. All right. Let's move to your questions. I have listed, my contact information there, Holly's contact information there. We are always happy to talk. We always start with free consultations. If we're not the right people to help you, we will connect you to, one of the many resources that we're in touch with that might be a better fit. But I'll pause the screen share and let's just take your questions. I know a lot of you probably have questions about the college admissions process itself, but I would love to hear from people who are struggling maybe to talk to your kids about something, or navigating that process of getting your kid motivated or any of those sorts of things. What do we got happening in the audience right now? Oh, we've got one from Kristen already. How do you have clarity and confidence in the process and project that to calm your kid when you have lots of fears about the parts of the process that they or you cannot control, like overcoming the horror stories we've all heard of kids not getting in anywhere? Before you answer, Holly, I will say I find it rare that a kid doesn't get in anywhere. They might say they're not getting in anywhere, but actually they got into like 5 or 6 colleges that they think are not newsworthy. And so then they say I didn't get in anywhere. Right. I mean, I've never encountered a student who actually did not get in anywhere. And if they didn't get in anywhere, there was probably a problem with building their college list. So all of you who asked me about how do you build a college list, let's get you that information so that that is not going to happen to your child. But that's not even the point of this question. Holly, I turn it over to you.
I'll start with one little anecdote. That this is very recent. It was the favorite student that I don't have favorites, but kind of my real favorite student that I worked with this year. She was in that position, extremely qualified applicant in every way. Didn't get into any of the schools that she wanted to go to. She had an option, but just desperately didn't want to go to it. Hadn't thought through the list that much. She took a gap year and did some really awesome things. Then we worked together on the last, another round of college applications, which was extremely vulnerable and scary thing to do, to risk rejection once more. And I was so proud of her for pouring herself into this application. She's going to Dartmouth, right? Like, so it's not, I mean, there's the horror stories. So, but one side of that is that also that it's not that bad on the other side of it. If you have an attitude of saying like, okay, these were the choices that I made in the college application. The process is what it is. This is where I'm at. It's not the end of the world, even if it may feel that way. So I think one of the big things that can help is one, listening to Sheila about developing a college list, which I agree is really, really foundational for just understanding and managing risk too, right? Like you understand yourself, you understand what will be a good fit, but you can hedge your bets by having a well-rounded list that can help build confidence that something drastic is not going to happen. But I think also I encourage people to stretch their goal a little, not just think about the moment of getting into colleges and acceptance as what they're really working toward, but see, okay, what I really want to be a veterinarian. Like this is this is the goal here. And there are several pathways for me to get there. This is the one I'm pursuing right now that makes the most sense, is applying to college at this point, applying to these different schools. But they can know that if that didn't work out, which is really rare if you have a really balanced list, but if it doesn't work out, that there's still pathways available and really good ones. Um, so yeah, it is hard. I think one of the key is that there's probably going to take a little teamwork between you and your team, talking through some of the anxieties that are coming up out of here. It's like, okay, what are we fearing? What's the worst case scenario here? And is it as bad as we imagine?
Um, there's something else that's coming up for me here that relates to one of the slides that you shared earlier, Holly. This is one of those limiting beliefs that if you don't get in the sort of first time around, everything's going to fall apart. And this is sort of a lie we've all been told since we were like, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade. If you don't do well in school, you're not going to get into a good college, and then you're not going to get into a good job. And then, what's your life going to be? Right. But I do think, in addition to the story that Holly just shared about her student who took a gap year and then reapplied, sometimes kids going to not their dream school is the best thing that could ever happen to them. Right. There's so many stories of this, students who didn't get into the school that they were just so sure that was the right place for them. They ended up somewhere else. Maybe they're a little disappointed, but once they get there, they kind of change their perspective on how meaningful where they go to college is. Right. There are certainly some colleges that put you on a track for a certain type of career. But not every kid wants that kind of career or should have. that kind of career, right? Not everybody needs to go to an Ivy. I mean, I went to Harvard, and sometimes I won't say I regret it, but I do think I would have had a better college experience and probably success earlier in my adult life had I gone somewhere else, right? So getting into the right college does not mean they're, fate is sealed as successful. But also not getting into that college doesn't mean they're not going to be successful either, right? They can learn so much from that process. What other questions do we have? Feel free to put it in the chat, or come off of mute. Julie asks, is mom worth the work in investment? I feel like you're saying something about, should I be investing in myself at this moment?
Absolutely. This is a very expensive, like all of this is a lot to consider investing in. So it seems like if I can get my act together, I'm going to be a whole lot more useful to my kid. And so is that the right direction for investment right now? And it feels like there's a lot of stigma around investments around ourselves and around this college work. And I think that that's probably not accurate. It's probably what we do and what we should do. So just thought I'd pose that question.
I love that question, Julie. Holly, what do you think?
Well, I think absolutely. And I think that when you can see what effect that any kind of transformation in your parenting role will have on your child and their success, I think that's where you begin to see the justification for that. I mean, one, if there is justification for you feeling better, for you feeling confident and finding clarity, absolutely, that's there. But the benefits of parent coaching, and taking the time to work on yourself in this transformative process really does have benefits for your relationship with your kid. And as Sheila pointed out, I think so rightly, it's like, when they move out, if they do, it's going to change no matter what. And so the more you're supporting and slowly sort of ramping up to this autonomy that they'll have, the less it's going to feel like falling off a cliff. And so you're in many ways, like by focusing on this transition, investing in a huge aspect of your lifetime relationship with your kids.
Okay, that's really powerful. It's almost like the last big set of lessons, almost like while they're here with me. That's powerful. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah. And one of the things I hear a lot from the parents of the kids that my team works with is, I've only got, 2 years left with them. I only have a year left with them. I don't want to spend it nagging. I don't want to spend it making them feel like I don't think they can do this. I don't want to spend it in the stress of this process. I want to spend it, bonding with them, really getting to know them as they are becoming who they want to be, and like take this like negative thing out of our relationship, and outsource it to somebody else. So like, I have to be the bad guy. I'm never the bad guy, but parents feel like they don't have to be the bad guy. They'll give it to me. Parent can vent to me, student can vent to me, everything's getting done, but the parent and the student have a new way to relate to each other because there isn't this big thing in the way. And the other thing that came up for me was like the oxygen mask thing on an airplane, right? Like, I, as a mom, like, I want to put the oxygen mask on my kid first, but that's not really going to be the best solution here, right? Like, if I can take care of my needs, and then I'm going to be in a better place to support them with whatever they need. So just as you were saying, Julie, I think it's really important that we invest in ourselves, and it's a good way to model for our young people what self-care might look like, and the kind of parent you want to be, the memory of the parent you want to leave them with as they are leaving the house. I mentioned that Holly and I prepared free gift for you, so you can scan this QR code. I will, in my email follow-up with the video, I will send this link around, but this will take you to a place where you can download those cards that has all of the tasks for the different aspects of the the college application process instructions for how to set some ground rules with your kid around how they're the owner of this process and how that they can delegate to you or to other members of who you deem as the support team, various parts of that process, and set up a check-in meeting so that you have a place and a time to talk about this and it just doesn't fill the entire house all the time. It can be confined to kind of one area. But do feel free to reach out to us with your questions. And then our other free gift to you is I'm going to give you a couple minutes back in your day. So I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you for joining us today.